I stared at my phone, replaying the voicemail for the third time. Dad's voice was cold, distant. Nothing like the man who used to read me bedtime stories. Serafina, after much consideration, your stepmother and I have decided you're not welcome at Rebecca's wedding. Please don't bring any drama or attempt to contact the family during this time. The line went dead. My half-sister was getting married and I wasn't invited to my own family celebration. 28 years of being the devoted daughter, and this was how it ended. Before we dive into this family betrayal story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're ready to hear how deep this rabbit hole of family secrets goes, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this revenge story is about to get wild. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. The wedding exclusion was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter that made my blood run cold. Our family law firm, Morrison & Associates, the business my grandfather built from nothing, was being dissolved. According to the legal documents, I was being bought out for a measly $50,000 for my 25% stake. The same stake that independent valuations had estimated at over $2 million just 6 months prior. I immediately drove to the office, my hands shaking as I pushed through the familiar glass doors. The receptionist, Maria, who had known me since I was 12, wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Serafina. Mr. Morrison left instructions that you're not allowed in the building. This is my family's business, Maria. My grandfather's name is on the door." "I know, honey. I'm just following orders." That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by every document I could find related to the firm. Something wasn't adding up. The financial statements showed massive losses, but I remembered the celebration dinner just 8 months ago when Dad announced our best year ever. We had landed 3 major corporate clients, and the books were healthier than they had been in decades. I called my college roommate Jessica, who had become a forensic accountant. "Jess, I need your eyes on something. Can you come over?" When Jessica arrived 2 hours later with her laptop and a bottle of wine, I spread everything across my dining room table. She whistled low as she examined the documents. "Sarah, these numbers are completely fabricated. Look here. This expense report shows payments to consulting firms that don't exist. I ran the addresses and half of them are vacant lots." My heart sank as the pieces began falling into place. How much are we talking about? Conservatively, someone has been siphoning at least $800,000 over the past 18 months. But here's the really interesting part. Look at the timing of these transactions. Jessica pointed to a series of large withdrawals. These all coincide with major deposits into an account listed here as special projects. Want to guess who has signatory authority on that account? I already knew the answer. Dad and Rebecca. Bingo! And look at this. She pulled up another document on her laptop. Rebecca's wedding venue, the Ashford Estate. That place costs minimum $150,000 for a weekend. The dress she posted on Instagram, that's a $15,000 Vera Wang. The honeymoon 2 weeks in Bali at a resort that runs $800 a night. The room started spinning. My own father had been stealing from the company to fund his stepdaughter's extravagant lifestyle, while pushing me out with a fraction of what my shares were worth. But Jessica wasn't done. "There's more, Sarah. I found a purchase agreement for a house in Rebecca's name. A1, $2 million house that was bought 6 months ago. Guess who co-signed the mortgage?" I felt sick. Dad. And according to this bank statement I found in the stack, the down payment came directly from the firm's operating account. We're not just talking about theft, Serafina. This is systematic embezzlement designed specifically to benefit Rebecca while cutting you out entirely. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every family dinner where Rebecca had made snide comments about my entitled attitude. Every time my stepmother Caroline had suggested I should find my own path instead of relying on family money. They hadn't just excluded me from the wedding, they had systematically stolen my inheritance and used it to launch Rebecca into a life of luxury. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to that wedding invitation or not, but I wouldn't be going as the hurt, rejected daughter. I would be going as someone who knew exactly what they had done and was ready to expose every single lie. The Ashford estate looked like something out of a fairy tale, with white tents scattered across manicured lawns and string lights twinkling in the early evening light. I had spent 3 days preparing for this moment, and I looked the part of a wedding guest in my navy dress and subtle jewelry. What guests couldn't see was the small recording device pinned inside my jacket and the manila envelope tucked discreetly in my purse. I arrived during the cocktail hour when people were mingling, and the bride and groom were busy with photos. Jessica had given me copies of the most damning financial documents, and I had spent the morning making additional copies for strategic distribution. My plan was simple: expose the truth to the people who mattered most. I spotted Uncle Robert first, Dad's brother and a respected judge in our county. He had always been the family's moral compass, the one person everyone trusted to do the right thing. When he saw me approaching, his face lit up with genuine surprise and warmth. "Serafina, I was wondering where you were. Richard said you were traveling for work and couldn't make it." "Actually, Uncle Robert, that's not quite true. Dad uninvited me from the wedding. But I'm here because there's something you need to know about what's been happening at the firm." I handed him the envelope. "I need you to look at these documents. Really look at them." As Uncle Robert examined the papers, his expression shifted from confusion to concern to outright anger. "Serafina, are you sure about these numbers? I had a forensic accountant verify everything. Dad has been embezzling money from the firm to pay for Rebecca's lifestyle. The house, the wedding, probably her car. It's all been funded by stealing from the business that Grandpa built. This is fraud. Criminal fraud." Uncle Robert's voice was barely above a whisper. "If these documents are accurate, Richard has committed multiple felonies. There's more." I pulled out my phone and showed him photos Jessica had taken of additional bank records. "The buyout offer he made me, it's designed to hide the theft. If I accept $50,000 for my shares, there's no reason for anyone to dig deeper into the firm's finances. But if I reject it and demand a proper audit, the whole scheme falls apart." Uncle Robert was already reaching for his own phone. "Serafina, I need you to know that I had no idea about any of this. If I had known what Richard was doing—" "I know you didn't, Uncle Robert. That's why I came to you first." What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. Uncle Robert immediately called his wife, Aunt Margaret, who served on the board of the country club where Dad was a member. Within 30 minutes, she had discreetly contacted 3 other board members who were attending the wedding. Meanwhile, I approached Dad's law school roommate, Frank Hamilton, who now worked for the state attorney's office. Frank's reaction was even more dramatic than Uncle Robert's. "Jesus Christ, Serafina! Do you understand what you're showing me? Criminal embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Yes, I understand perfectly. I have to report this. I mean, I have no choice. This isn't just family drama. This is serious white-collar crime." As the evening progressed, I watched the carefully constructed facade of the perfect family celebration begin to crumble. Uncle Robert had cornered Dad near the bar, and even from across the lawn I could see Dad's face growing pale as he realized what was happening. Frank had stepped away to make phone calls, his prosecutor instincts kicking into high gear. But the real moment of truth came when I approached the head table during dinner. Rebecca was radiant in her $15,000 dress, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Caroline sat beside Dad, her plastic smile faltering when she saw me walking toward them. Serafina. Rebecca's voice was sickeningly sweet. I thought you weren't coming. Daddy said you were too busy with work. Actually, Rebecca, I wouldn't miss this for the world, especially since I helped pay for it. The color drained from Dad's face. Serafina, this isn't the time or place. Really? Because I think this is exactly the time and place. I raised my voice just enough for nearby tables to hear. I think everyone should know how you funded this beautiful wedding, how you stole nearly $1 million from our family's law firm to pay for your stepdaughter's house, her dress, this venue, all while trying to cheat me out of my rightful inheritance. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Caroline started to stand, but Dad grabbed her arm. Around us, conversations stopped as guests turned to stare. You have no proof of anything, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I do. I pulled out my phone and activated the recording app Jessica had helped me set up. I have bank records, forged documents, and testimony from a forensic accountant. Oh, and I have Uncle Robert, who's already called the State Bar Association, and Frank Hamilton from the prosecutor's office, who's very interested in meeting with you tomorrow morning. Rebecca started crying. Not the delicate tears of an overwhelmed bride, but the ugly sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. Caroline was whispering frantically in Dad's ear, probably trying to figure out damage control. But it was too late for damage control. The moment I had been building toward finally arrived. Standing in front of the entire wedding party, surrounded by family and friends who had watched me grow up, I spoke the words that would change everything. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this beautiful celebration, but I thought you should know that you're attending a wedding that was paid for with stolen money. My father has been systematically embezzling from our family business, and every dollar spent on this event was taken illegally from the company my grandfather built with his own hands. The aftermath of my announcement was immediate and devastating. Rebecca's new husband, Marcus, demanded answers from Dad, while guests whispered frantically at their tables. Several people began leaving early, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. But what surprised me most was how many people approached me privately to offer their support. The first unexpected ally came from Rebecca's own side of the family. Marcus's older sister, Diana, pulled me aside near the garden pavilion. I've been watching Rebecca's spending for months, she said quietly. Marcus has been stressed about money, working double shifts to pay for wedding expenses, while Rebecca kept adding more and more expensive details. When he asked where she was getting the money for upgrades, she always said your dad was being generous. How generous? Try $50,000 worth of generous. The flowers alone cost $8,000. She hired a celebrity wedding planner from Los Angeles who charged $25,000 just for coordination. Marcus thought your dad was just being an amazing stepfather. Diana handed me her business card. I'm an investigative journalist for the Herald Tribune. If you're serious about exposing this, I want to help. Financial fraud stories are my specialty. Within an hour, I had gained 3 more crucial allies. Mrs. Patterson, my grandfather's former secretary, who had worked at the firm for 30 years before retiring, approached me with tears in her eyes. Your grandfather would be rolling in his grave, she said. I kept wondering why Richard let me go so suddenly last year. Said the firm was downsizing, but I knew we were busier than ever. Now I understand. He needed me gone so I wouldn't see the books. Mrs. Patterson revealed that she still had keys to the old filing system and access to archived records that predated the digital conversion. If you need evidence of what the firm's finances looked like before this mess started, I can help you get it. The third ally was completely unexpected. Dr. Sarah Chen, Rebecca's former roommate from college, had been watching the drama unfold from her table near the dance floor. She approached me as I was leaving. Rebecca called me 3 months ago asking if I wanted to buy her old car. Dr. Chen explained. A 2-year-old BMW that she said she was upgrading from. When I asked how she could afford a new car so soon after buying a house, she laughed and said her stepdad was taking care of everything because she was his favorite. Dr. Chen paused, looking genuinely disturbed. Serafina, she bragged about manipulating your father. She said Caroline had figured out how to make him feel guilty about your mom's death, and that Rebecca was the daughter he never had. She called you the trust fund princess, who needed to learn that the world didn't revolve around you. The revelation hits me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money. It was a deliberate campaign to replace me in my father's affections while stealing my inheritance. Rebecca hadn't just stumbled into this situation. She had orchestrated it. By the time I left the wedding venue that night, I had a team of 5 people committed to helping me expose the truth. Diana would investigate the financial trail and prepare a news story. Mrs. Patterson would help me access historical firm records. Dr. Chen would provide testimony about Rebecca's admissions. Uncle Robert was coordinating with the State Bar Association. And Frank Hamilton was building a criminal case. But the most important development came the next morning when I received an unexpected phone call. Ms. Morrison, this is Detective Lisa Rodriguez with the Financial Crimes Unit. I understand you have information about embezzlement at Morrison and Associates. Yes, I do. Frank Hamilton said someone would be calling. Actually, Ms. Morrison Frank wasn't the only person who contacted us. We received 3 separate reports yesterday evening. One from your Uncle Robert Morrison, one from Mr. Hamilton, and one from a Diana Patterson who claims to have additional evidence about this case. My heart started racing. 3 separate reports. Ma'am, when we get multiple reports about the same crime from different sources, it typically means we're dealing with something significant. I'd like to set up a meeting with you and your documentation as soon as possible. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon at the police station. I spent the morning organizing every piece of evidence Jessica and I had compiled, making sure everything was clearly labeled and easy to understand. But as I prepared to leave my apartment, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Serafina. This is Marcus, Rebecca's husband. We need to talk. I was shocked. Marcus, is everything okay? No, everything is definitely not okay. After what you said last night, Rebecca and I had a long conversation. She admitted that she's been lying to me about where the money for our lifestyle has been coming from. She said your dad has been giving her access to business accounts because he considers her his real daughter. Marcus's voice was strained with emotion. Serafina, I had no idea that money was stolen. I would never have accepted it if I had known. Rebecca made it sound like your dad was just being generous because he loved her so much. What are you going to do? I'm going to cooperate with whatever investigation happens, and I'm going to make Rebecca return everything she can. The house, the car, whatever we can liquidate. I didn't marry a thief, and I won't stay married to one. Marcus had just become my most powerful ally. Someone from inside Rebecca's inner circle who was willing to testify against her. But more importantly, his willingness to leave Rebecca sent a clear message that her actions had consequences beyond just legal troubles. That afternoon at the police station, Detective Rodriguez reviewed our evidence with the focus of someone who had seen financial fraud cases before. She asked detailed questions about the timeline, the amounts involved, and the methods used to hide the theft. Ms. Morrison, based on what you've shown me, we're looking at multiple felony charges. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, possibly money laundering if we can prove they were deliberately moving money through different accounts to hide its origin. What happens next? We execute search warrants for the firm's financial records and your father's personal bank accounts. We interview witnesses and gather additional evidence. And we present the case to the district attorney for prosecution. Detective Rodriguez paused and looked directly at me. I want you to understand something, Ms. Morrison. Once we start this process, there is no going back. Your father will likely face significant prison time if convicted. Are you prepared for that? I thought about every family dinner where Rebecca had made cutting remarks about my career choices. Every time Dad had defended her behavior by saying I needed to be more understanding. Every condescending smile from Caroline when she suggested I should be more grateful for the opportunities I had been given. Detective Rodriguez, my father, made his choices. He chose to steal from the business my grandfather built. He chose to fund Rebecca's lifestyle with stolen money. And he chose to exclude me from the family while using my inheritance to pay for his stepdaughter's wedding. I didn't create this situation. I'm just refusing to be silent about it. 3 weeks into the investigation, I thought we had an airtight case. Detective Rodriguez had executed search warrants and found exactly what we expected. Falsified records, unauthorized transfers, and a paper trail that led directly to Rebecca's accounts. The district attorney had agreed to pursue felony charges. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Then Diana called me at 7 in the morning, her voice shaking. Serafina, we have a problem. A big problem. What happened? Someone leaked information about the investigation to your father. He knows about every piece of evidence we've gathered, every witness we've interviewed, and every charge the DA is planning to file. My blood ran cold. How is that possible? I don't know, but yesterday evening Richard's attorney filed motions to suppress evidence claiming illegal search and seizure. He's also claiming that you orchestrated a malicious prosecution based on a family dispute rather than actual crimes. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. Diana, the search warrants were completely legal. Frank Hamilton walked me through the process himself. That's just it, Sarah. Frank is the one who leaked the information. The words hit me like a physical blow. Frank Hamilton, my father's law school roommate. The prosecutor who had seemed so outraged by the evidence had been feeding information back to Dad the entire time. I confirmed it through a source at the DA's office. Diana continued. Frank has been in regular contact with your father's defense attorney. He's been sharing investigation details and helping them prepare counter-arguments to every piece of evidence we've found. But why would Frank help him? He seemed genuinely angry about the fraud. Money, Sarah. Always money. I did some digging into Frank's finances. He's been having serious problems. His wife's medical bills, his kids' college tuition, a mortgage that's underwater. 3 days after the wedding, Frank received a $50,000 consulting fee from a legal firm that represents your father. I felt sick. Frank had betrayed not just me, but the entire justice system he was supposed to serve. Worse, his betrayal had potentially destroyed our case before it even went to trial. "There's more bad news," Diana said. Marcus changed his mind about cooperating. Yesterday, Rebecca's attorney contacted him and explained that as her husband, he could face charges as an accessory if the prosecution decides he knowingly benefited from stolen money. He's now claiming he was misled and that his previous statements to police were made under emotional duress. So he's protecting himself instead of doing the right thing. Exactly. And without Marcus's testimony, we lose our inside witness to Rebecca's admissions about manipulating your father. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. Frank's betrayal had compromised the criminal investigation, and Marcus's defection had eliminated key testimony. But the worst revelation was yet to come. "Sarah, I need to tell you something else. Something I discovered about Mrs. Patterson." Mrs. Patterson, my grandfather's former secretary, who had seemed so loyal and supportive, had apparently been playing both sides from the beginning. She's been feeding information to Caroline about our investigation. I found out because Caroline's sister works at the Herald Tribune in advertising. She mentioned that Caroline seemed to know specific details about my research before I had even published anything. Mrs. Patterson is working with Caroline. It gets worse. Remember how she offered to help us access old financial records from the firm? She's been removing documents. Detective Rodriguez went to collect the historical files Mrs. Patterson promised to preserve, and half of them are missing. The ones that would have shown the firm's legitimate financial status before the embezzlement started. I realized we had been completely outmaneuvered. Dad, Caroline, and Rebecca hadn't just stolen money. They had systematically identified and neutralized every threat to their scheme. Frank was bought off, Marcus was scared into silence, and Mrs. Patterson was actively sabotaging evidence. Diana, what do we have left? Honestly, not much. The financial records we gathered are still valid, but without witness testimony. And with compromised chain of custody on some documents, the criminal case is falling apart. Your father's attorney is arguing that this was all a family business dispute that got blown out of proportion. That afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called with the news I had been dreading. "Ms. Morrison, I'm sorry to tell you that the district attorney has decided not to pursue criminal charges at this time. The defense has raised too many questions about evidence handling and witness credibility. Without a stronger case, the DA doesn't think we can get a conviction." So my father just gets away with it. Not necessarily. You still have civil options. You can sue for recovery of the stolen funds, and you can report him to the State Bar Association for professional misconduct. But criminal prosecution is off the table for now. I hung up the phone and stared at my apartment wall, feeling completely defeated. Not only had Dad stolen my inheritance and excluded me from the family, but he had managed to corrupt the justice system itself to avoid consequences. Frank Hamilton had sold his integrity for $50,000. Marcus had chosen self-preservation over truth. Mrs. Patterson had betrayed my grandfather's memory to protect the people who had destroyed his legacy. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by boxes of evidence that would never see the inside of a courtroom. For the first time since discovering the embezzlement, I began to wonder if exposing the truth had been worth it. I had lost my family, my inheritance, and now my faith in the justice system. But then I remembered Rebecca's smug smile at the wedding when she thought she had gotten away with everything. I thought about Caroline's condescending comments over the years about my sense of entitlement. Most of all, I thought about my grandfather, who had built Morrison and Associates from nothing and trusted that his family would preserve his legacy. The criminal justice system might have failed me, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source imaginable. 2 days after the DA dropped the criminal charges, I received a call from someone I had never heard of. Ms. Morrison. This is Elena Vasquez. I'm a forensic accountant with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I understand you have information about tax fraud involving Morrison and Associates. Tax fraud, I reported embezzlement, but Ms. Morrison, when someone steals $800,000 from a business and fails to report that income to the IRS, it becomes our jurisdiction. And when they use that money to purchase real estate and luxury items while claiming business losses, it becomes a very serious tax evasion case. Elena explained that the IRS had been conducting their own parallel investigation for the past 6 months, completely independent of the local police investigation that Frank Hamilton had compromised. We've been tracking suspicious financial activity associated with Morrison and Associates since last year. Large cash transactions, property purchases that don't match reported income, and business expense claims that appeared fraudulent. Your father and step-family have been on our radar for quite some time. Why didn't anyone tell me about this investigation? Because we didn't know you existed as a potential witness until Detective Rodriguez forwarded your evidence to us after the DA declined to prosecute. Ms. Morrison, what you've documented corroborates everything we've been investigating independently. Elena's investigation was comprehensive and devastating. Unlike the local police, the IRS had resources and authority that couldn't be compromised by small-town politics and personal relationships. We've subpoenaed records from 12 different banks, examined every property transaction involving your family members, and traced money flows going back 3 years. What we've found goes far beyond the $800,000 you initially reported. How far beyond? Try $1.6 million. Your father has been systematically stealing from the firm for nearly 3 years, not 18 months. And the tax evasion charges alone carry a maximum sentence of 15 years in federal prison. But Elena's most shocking revelation involved Rebecca's new house. The property was purchased using a sophisticated money laundering scheme. Your father would bill fake legal services to shell companies, those companies would pay the firm, and then the money would be transferred to Rebecca's accounts as gifts that stayed under federal reporting requirements. But they made one critical mistake. What mistake? They claimed the house purchase as a business expense for the law firm. According to their tax filings, that $1.2 million property is supposedly a client conference center for Morrison and Associates. But county records show it's zoned residential and utility records show it's occupied as a single-family home. Elena had documentation that would be impossible to discredit or compromise. Federal investigators had followed proper procedures, maintained chain of custody, and gathered evidence through legitimate channels that Frank Hamilton couldn't interfere with. Ms. Morrison, we're prepared to offer you a deal. If you cooperate with our investigation and testify before a federal grand jury, we'll pursue full prosecution of everyone involved. That includes your father, your stepmother for conspiracy, and Rebecca for knowingly receiving proceeds from illegal activity. The federal investigation also revealed the extent of the conspiracy against me. Elena showed me intercepted communications between Caroline and Mrs. Patterson, discussing how to neutralize the Serafina problem before I could uncover the financial irregularities. Your stepmother orchestrated the entire scheme to push you out of the family business. She identified you as the biggest threat because of your legitimate ownership stake and your close relationship with employees who might notice discrepancies. Elena handed me printed emails between Caroline and Rebecca discussing my exclusion from family events. Look at this email from Caroline to Rebecca dated 6 months ago. We need to make sure Serafina feels unwelcome at family gatherings. The more isolated she becomes, the less likely she is to ask questions about business finances. Richard still has guilt about her mother, so we need to be subtle but firm. The emails revealed a calculated campaign to alienate me from Dad while positioning Rebecca as the favored daughter who deserved financial support. And here's Rebecca's response. Don't worry about Serafina. Daddy already feels guilty about giving me money that should go to the business. If we keep making her look demanding and entitled, he'll eventually cut her off completely to prove he's not playing favorites. Reading those words was devastating, but also liberating. For years, I had wondered if I was imagining the subtle hostility and manipulation. Now I had proof that every snide comment, every family gathering I wasn't invited to, every time Dad took Rebecca's side in disagreements, it had all been orchestrated. But Elena had saved the best revelation for last. Ms. Morrison, we also discovered that your father has been lying about the firm's financial status to hide the extent of his theft. The business isn't failing like he claims. In fact, after removing the fraudulent expenses and stolen funds, Morrison & Associates is extremely profitable and worth significantly more than the $2 million you initially estimated. She handed me a corrected valuation report prepared by federal forensic accountants. Your 25% stake is actually worth approximately $4.2 million. Your father's buyout offer of $50,000 represents about 1% of your actual ownership value. The scope of the theft was staggering, but so was the scope of the federal government's response. Elena explained that they were prepared to seize all assets purchased with stolen funds, including Rebecca's house, her car, and even her wedding jewelry. Federal asset forfeiture is very straightforward, Ms. Morrison. If something was purchased with proceeds from criminal activity, we can seize it regardless of who currently owns it. Rebecca's house will be sold at auction, and the proceeds will be used to compensate the victims of the fraud. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. The federal investigation was thorough, professional, and immune to the small-town corruption that had derailed the local case. What do you need from me? Your testimony, your cooperation, and your patience. Federal cases take time, but they're also virtually impossible to beat when we have this much evidence. Your father and stepfamily are going to face consequences they never imagined. Elena's final piece of news was the most satisfying. Oh, and Ms. Morrison, Frank Hamilton is also under investigation for obstruction of justice and accepting bribes in a federal case. His $50,000 consulting fee came from an account funded with stolen money, which makes him an accessory to money laundering. The tide had completely turned. What started as a family dispute had become a federal criminal investigation with resources and authority that no amount of local influence could stop. 6 months later, I stood in the federal courthouse watching my father being led away in handcuffs. The judge had just sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison for tax evasion, wire fraud, and money laundering. Caroline received 4 years for conspiracy and hiding assets. Rebecca, who had tried to claim ignorance about the source of her funding, received 3 years after federal investigators proved she had actively participated in falsifying documents. The federal case had been devastating and thorough. Every asset purchased with stolen money was seized and sold. Rebecca's house, her car, even her wedding ring, all gone to pay restitution to the firm and cover back taxes. The $1.2 million house sold for $1.4 million at auction, and every penny went toward restoring the firm's finances. Frank Hamilton had been disbarred and sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for obstruction of justice. Mrs. Patterson faced fraud charges for destroying evidence and received 18 months of supervised probation. Marcus, who had ultimately cooperated with federal investigators, avoided prosecution but lost his home and savings in Rebecca's financial collapse. But the most satisfying moment came when Elena called me with the final financial accounting. Ms. Morrison, after recovering all stolen assets and calculating interest and penalties, the federal government is prepared to restore Morrison and Associates to full financial health. Your 25% stake plus damages for the attempted buyout fraud comes to approximately $5.8 million. The firm that Dad claimed was failing was actually thriving. With the stolen money returned and the fraudulent expenses removed, Morrison and Associates was more profitable than it had ever been. Uncle Robert had agreed to serve as interim managing partner, while I decided whether to take an active role in running the business or sell my stake to legitimate buyers. More importantly, the truth had been exposed completely. Diana's investigative series in the Herald Tribune had won a state journalism award for uncovering corruption in local legal and law enforcement systems. Her reporting had led to investigations of other cases Frank Hamilton had compromised and resulted in reforms to prevent prosecutors from sharing sensitive information with defense attorneys who might have conflicts of interest. Dr. Chen had provided crucial testimony about Rebecca's admissions, helping federal investigators prove that the theft had been deliberate and ongoing. Her willingness to come forward despite personal risk had been instrumental in securing Rebecca's conviction. The day of Dad's sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Marcus stood at my door looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. Serafina. I know I have no right to ask, but I wanted to apologize. For not standing up earlier, for letting myself be scared into silence, for not seeing what Rebecca was really doing. Marcus, you were manipulated too. Rebecca and Caroline spent years perfecting their ability to make people feel guilty for questioning them. I should have known something was wrong when Rebecca kept getting money for things we couldn't afford. I should have asked harder questions instead of just being grateful that someone was helping us. Marcus handed me an envelope. This is the insurance money from selling our furniture and personal items. It's not much, about $12,000, but I want you to have it. It feels like blood money to me now. I looked at the envelope and handed it back to him. Marcus, keep it. You're going to need it to rebuild your life. And for what it's worth, I think Rebecca's biggest victims were the people who trusted her most. The conversation with Marcus helped me realize something important about forgiveness and justice. The goal had never been to destroy everyone who had been touched by Dad and Caroline's corruption. It was to make sure that actions had consequences and that the truth came to light. As I settled into my new role overseeing the restored Morrison and Associates, I found myself surrounded by a chosen family that was stronger than the biological family that had betrayed me. Diana had become one of my closest friends, using her investigative skills to help me identify and interview potential new partners for the firm. Elena had provided not just professional support, but personal friendship during the most difficult months of the legal process. Uncle Robert, who had been horrified to learn the full extent of his brother's crimes, had become a true father figure. He helped me navigate the complex decisions about the firm's future and provided the emotional support I needed to heal from years of manipulation and gaslighting. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter from Rebecca in federal prison. She wanted to apologize and asked if I would consider visiting her. I read the letter twice and then put it in my desk drawer unopened. Some people deserve forgiveness, but forgiveness doesn't require maintaining relationships with people who have proven they can't be trusted. The final closure came when I decided to renovate the firm's offices. In my grandfather's old office behind a picture frame, I found a handwritten note he had left for me years before his death. Serafina, it read, "If you're reading this, it means someone tried to take what belongs to you. Remember that Morrison and Associates was built on truth and justice. Never let anyone convince you that family loyalty means accepting lies or tolerating theft. The strongest families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into." Reading those words, I realized that everything that had happened, the betrayal, the theft, the exclusion from the wedding, had been necessary to discover who I really was and what I truly valued. The biological family that had rejected me had been replaced by people who supported me because of my character, not my DNA. Looking back on this whole revenge story, I learned that justice isn't always immediate, but it's often inevitable. The people who thought they could manipulate and steal their way to happiness discovered that federal investigators are much harder to fool than family members who want to believe the best about people they love. Have you ever experienced family betrayal where people you trusted turned out to be completely different than you thought? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics makes all the difference. If this story of justice finally being served resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories where karma actually works. And if you know someone who's dealing with family financial manipulation, please share this video. Sometimes people need to hear that fighting back is possible and worth it. Thank you for listening to my family revenge story. And remember that the best revenge is often just refusing to let people get away with hurting you. May you all find the courage to stand up for yourselves and the wisdom to build chosen families with people who actually deserve your loyalty.